My wife looked me straight in the eye and said, "Choose. Me or your mother." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't argue. I just smiled and made my choice. 6 months later, she was standing at my door, pregnant and begging to come back. Folks, Uncle Mickle here. I've lived long enough to know that life doesn't always break you with explosions. Sometimes it breaks you with a sentence. One sentence that rearranges everything you thought you knew about love, loyalty, and yourself. And if you're still listening right now, I'm guessing you've heard a sentence like that before. This happened a few years back, but it still feels close. Close enough that I can remember the way the room smelled when she said it. Coffee gone cold. The hum of the refrigerator. That quiet hum you only notice when something important is about to be said. We were standing in the kitchen of the house we bought together. The house we picked out on a rainy Sunday, laughing like kids, arguing over paint colors and drawer handles like that's what real problems were. I was in my late 40s then, old enough to think I had things figured out, old enough to believe that if you worked hard, kept your word, and treated people right, life would meet you halfway. I'd been married to my wife. Her name was Sarah, for 7 years. No screaming fights, no flying plates, just a slow, steady shift I didn't want to see. And my mother, well, my mother had always been a part of my life. Not in a controlling way. Not in a call every day and meddle kind of way. She was widowed young. Raised me mostly on her own. Taught me the difference between right and convenient. She lived 10 minutes away. Kept her boundaries. Never showed up unannounced. But she mattered to me. Deeply. That morning, Sarah was already upset when I walked into the kitchen. Arms crossed. Jaw tight. That look people get when they've rehearsed something in their head 100 times and are finally ready to deliver it. I remember thinking, here it is. Something's coming. I just didn't know how heavy it was going to land. She started talking about feeling second place. About how my mother had too much influence. About how every holiday, every decision, every conversation somehow circled back to her. I listened. I always listened. I nodded. I tried to understand. I told her she mattered to me, that our marriage mattered, and then she said it. Not shouted, not whispered, just flat, calculated. Choose Mickle. Me or your mother. Something went very still inside me in that moment. Not angry, not scared. Clear. Clear in a way that surprised even me. Because when someone forces you into a corner like that, they're not asking for loyalty. They're asking for control. I looked at the woman I'd shared a bed with, a life with, plans with. I saw not a partner, but an ultimatum. And I realized something right there in that kitchen. If I gave in to this, I'd be choosing a lifetime of proving myself, of shrinking, of cutting pieces of my soul off one by one just to keep the peace. So I smiled. Not out of spite, out of certainty. I told her I needed some air. I went into the bedroom. I opened the closet. And for the first time in my life, I packed a bag knowing I might not be coming back. She thought I was bluffing. Most people do, right before they find out you're not. And that was the moment everything changed. Before I go any further, tell me something honestly. Have you ever been given an ultimatum by someone you loved? A moment where you realized the choice itself was the real betrayal? Tell me in the comments. Uncle Mickle's listening. I wasn't always the kind of man who packed a bag and walked out. Truth is, I used to believe marriage was about endurance, about sticking it out, even when it got uncomfortable, because uncomfortable was just part of building something real. When I met Sarah, I wasn't some wide-eyed kid chasing romance. I was already grown. I had a steady job, a routine, a quiet little life that didn't ask much of anybody. I worked hard, came home tired, paid my bills on time, and kept my circle small. The kind of life that isn't flashy, but it's solid. Sarah came into that life like a bright window getting thrown open. We met through a mutual friend at a backyard cookout. One of those ordinary weekends where you show up for a burger and end up meeting someone who changes your whole direction. She had a laugh that came easy, like she wasn't afraid to take up space in the world. She was sharp, too. Not book-showy, just aware. She asked questions that told you she was listening. And she looked at you like you were worth listening to. I remember driving home that night thinking, well, damn, Mickle, you might actually try again. My first marriage didn't end in fireworks. It ended in silence. Two people living in the same house, acting like roommates, pretending that was normal. So by the time Sarah came along, I wasn't chasing the fantasy. I wanted peace, partnership, somebody who could sit in the quiet with me and not make it feel like punishment. For a while, that's exactly what we were. We did the simple things that make a life feel like it has roots. Grocery runs, Sunday mornings with coffee, little weekend trips where we'd argue playfully about directions and end up laughing in a diner somewhere, splitting pancakes like we were 20 years younger. She'd put her feet up on the couch and talk about her day. And I'd listen, really listen, because I liked the sound of her voice filling up the house. When we got married, it didn't feel like a leap. It felt like a natural step, like we were already moving together, so we just made it official. And about my mother, Elaine, Sarah knew from day one that she was part of my life. Not in an unhealthy way, just in a real way. My mother had never been the type to interfere. She wasn't calling every hour or demanding keys to our place. She had her own house, her own garden, her own routine. But she was steady. The kind of woman who'd drop off a casserole if she heard you were sick, then leave before you could even offer her a plate. The kind who'd tell you, "I don't need to be in your business, Mickle. I just need to know you're okay." And then she'd go home. I visited her once or twice a week. Sometimes we'd fix something around her place. Sometimes we'd just sit and talk. She'd ask about work, about Sarah, about life. She wasn't nosy. She was present. And in the beginning, Sarah didn't just tolerate her. She seemed to respect her. She'd come with me sometimes. She'd compliment my mom's cooking. She'd laugh at my mom's little blunt one-liners. I'd see them at the kitchen table together and think, all right, this is good. This is what it's supposed to look like. So for a long time, my life felt balanced. Work, home, marriage, family. Nothing perfect, but nothing cracking either. Then, slowly, the temperature changed. It started with small things. Sarah stopped coming with me to my mom's place. At first it was normal. She was tired, had errands, didn't feel like going. I didn't push it. People need space. I understood that. Then she'd make little comments. Not big fights. Just little stings disguised as jokes. "Oh, you go check in with Elaine first. Must be nice having a second wife who cooks for you." I'd laugh it off, because that's what you do when you love someone, and you don't want to turn every comment into an argument. I'd kiss her forehead, tell her she was being dramatic, and move on. But her tone kept shifting. She started keeping score of time. If I spent an hour at my mom's, she'd say, "Wow, you were gone a while." If my mom called and I answered, she'd look away like the sound annoyed her. If I didn't answer, my mom would leave a voicemail, and Sarah would do this little sigh like the voicemail was an insult aimed at her. And I kept trying to smooth it over. I'd take Sarah out to dinner. I'd plan date nights. I'd bring home her favorite snacks. I'd make sure she knew she was my priority. Because in my mind, this was just one of those normal marriage seasons. A little insecurity, a little tension, something you talk through and it passes. But here's the truth I didn't want to admit. Sarah wasn't asking for reassurance. She was asking for distance. And distance from your own mother isn't a small request when your mother has never done anything to deserve being cut out. That's not a boundary. That's a punishment. I remember one night in particular, we were in bed, lights off, just the TV glow flickering across the room. My mom had called earlier that day, saying her car was making a strange noise. I told her I'd swing by after work the next day and take a look. Sarah didn't say anything at first, just lay there stiff. Then she said, very quietly, "She always finds a reason to need you." I turned my head toward her. "What?" She didn't repeat it. She just stared at the ceiling and said, "Never mind." And something about that, "never mind," made my stomach tighten. Because it wasn't a joke. It wasn't playful. It wasn't even a complaint. It was resentment. I should have stopped right there and had the conversation. The real one. The uncomfortable one. But I didn't. I told myself she was tired, stressed, having a moment. I told myself it would pass. That's what I thought was solid back then. My ability to keep things calm. To be the steady one. The reasonable one. The man who doesn't overreact. But sometimes, staying calm isn't strength. Sometimes it's just denial wearing a nice suit. And the next morning, when I woke up, Sarah was already up and dressed, phone in her hand, coffee untouched on the counter. She looked at me with that same tight jaw, like she'd been building something in her chest all night. And I felt it again, clear as a warning bell. Something is off. Now, let me ask you something before I go further. Have you ever had that gut feeling that something was off, but you ignored it because you didn't want to believe it? Tell me in the comments. I want to know I'm not alone in this. And that day, right before I walked out the door for work, Sarah said something that seemed small at the time, but it stuck with me. She said, "Just so you know, things are going to change soon. Now we need to talk. Not I'm feeling insecure. Just that. Like a promise. Like a warning." And I walked out the door pretending I didn't hear the threat hidden inside it. That day at work, I couldn't focus to save my life. I kept rereading the same email, the same paragraph, like the words might rearrange themselves into something clearer if I stared long enough. But my mind wasn't there. It was back in the kitchen, back in Sarah's tone, back in the way she said things are going to change soon, like she already knew the ending, and I was just catching up. By lunchtime, I did something I hadn't done in years. I called my mother. Not because of the car. Not really. I just needed to hear her voice. Needed to ground myself in something familiar. Something honest. She answered on the second ring. "Hey, Mickle. You okay?" That was my mother. Always started with "you okay?" before anything else. "Yeah," I said. "Just checking in." We talked for a few minutes. Nothing heavy. She mentioned the weather, the neighbor's dog, how her roses were finally blooming again. I told her work was busy. I didn't mention Sarah. Didn't mention the tension. I wasn't ready to give words to it yet. But when I hung up, I felt lighter. Like my chest had unclenched just a little. And that's when it hit me. If one phone call to my own mother made me feel calmer, why did my wife seem threatened by that? That question sat with me the rest of the afternoon. When I got home, Sarah was already there, sitting at the table. Laptop closed. Phone face down. Waiting. That should have been my first real clue. Usually she'd be scrolling, watching something, half distracted. But not that night. That night felt staged. Like she'd set the scene. She asked about my day. I asked about hers. Polite. Surface level. Two adults pretending not to feel the tension humming under the table. Then she said, "Your mom called today." I paused. Just for half a second. "How'd you know?" I asked. "She left a voicemail," Sarah said, "on the house phone. We barely use the house phone anymore. My mother only called it when she couldn't reach my cell, usually by accident. What did she want?" I asked. Sarah shrugged. Didn't listen to the whole thing. That bothered me more than I wanted to admit. Not because she didn't listen, but because she had listened. Enough to know who it was. Enough to decide it mattered. I kept my voice calm. "Is everything okay?" She looked at me then. Really looked at me. And for the first time in a long while, I didn't recognize what I saw. Not anger. Calculation. "I just think it's weird," she said. "How she always needs you." There it was again. That same sentence. Same framing. Same implication. I pulled my chair out and sat across from her. "Sarah, what's really going on?" She sighed. Big. Heavy. Like she'd been waiting for that question. "I'm tired, Mickle," she said. "Tired of feeling like I'm competing with someone who shouldn't even be in the competition." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't accuse. I just spoke the truth. "You're not competing with anyone. She's my mother." Sarah leaned back in her chair, folded her arms. "And I'm your wife." I nodded. "Yes, you are. And yet," she continued, "she still gets your time, your energy, your loyalty." That word stuck. Loyalty. I asked her, "Has my mother ever disrespected you?" She hesitated, just for a fraction of a second. "No," she said. But nothing," I said gently. "If she's crossed a line, tell me. I'll handle it." She didn't answer right away. Instead, she said something that changed the direction of everything. "I just need to know," she said slowly, "that if it ever came down to it, you'd choose me." There it was. Not the ultimatum yet, but the door it came through. I felt my chest tighten, not with fear, but with awareness. This wasn't about a specific incident. This wasn't about a voicemail or a visit or a comment. This was about control. I told her, marriage isn't about choosing one person to erase another. She smiled then. Not warmly. Not lovingly. That's where we disagree, she said. We didn't fight that night. That almost made it worse. We went through the motions. Dinner. TV. Bed. Two people lying inches apart with a gulf between them. I lay awake listening to her breathing, replaying the conversation over and over. Each time, it sounded less like insecurity and more like a test. And I knew something important in that moment. Tests don't come from love. They come from fear. The next few days, I started paying attention in a way I hadn't before. The way Sarah checked my phone when she thought I wasn't looking. The way she'd go quiet when I mentioned my mom's name. The way she'd say things like, "It must be nice to have someone who'll always take your side." She wasn't asking for reassurance anymore. She was building a case. And deep down, my instincts, the ones I'd ignored for too long, were finally speaking up. "Something is coming," they said. "And you're not going to like the terms." Folks, pause for a second. What would you have done in my position? Would you have confronted her right then? Or would you have waited and watched? Drop your answer below. I'm curious what you would have chosen. The truth doesn't usually arrive with drama. It creeps in quietly, piece by piece, until denial has nowhere left to hide. After that conversation, I stopped trying to smooth things over. I didn't confront her either. I watched. I listened. I paid attention to the spaces between her words, the pauses, the way she'd answer questions without actually answering them. Sarah started staying out later than usual. Nothing outrageous. An extra hour here, a vague explanation there. Work ran late. I needed air. I was with Jennifer. Names I knew. Stories that sounded reasonable enough to pass, if you weren't already alert. One evening, while she was in the shower, her phone lit up on the nightstand. I didn't rush for it. I didn't snatch it up like a jealous teenager. I just looked at the screen when it buzzed again. A message preview. From David. "Did you talk to him yet?" My stomach dropped. David wasn't a stranger. He was a co-worker of hers. Married. Someone we'd had dinner with once. Me shaking his hand, smiling, talking about football like everything was normal. Like men don't sometimes stand inches apart while their lives are quietly intersecting. I told myself not to jump to conclusions. One message doesn't mean betrayal. One message could mean anything. But the next buzz came. "We can't keep waiting." That's when my hands went cold. I didn't open the phone. I didn't need to. The words were loud enough already. When Sarah came back into the bedroom, towel wrapped around her hair, I asked her calmly, "Who's David to you right now?" She froze. Not confused. Not defensive. Cornered. "Why?" she asked. That answer told me everything. "If there's nothing to hide," I said, "then answer the question." She sat on the bed slowly, like her legs suddenly couldn't hold her. She didn't look at me. She stared at the floor. "It's complicated," she said. That sentence, "it's complicated," has buried more marriages than infidelity itself. I asked again, steadier this time, "Who is he?" She swallowed. "Hard. Someone who listens," she said. "Someone who makes me feel chosen." There it was. Not a confession yet, but close enough to smell the truth. I stood up because sitting suddenly felt impossible. "Are you having an affair?" She hesitated. That hesitation was the answer. "Yes," she said finally, "but it's not what you think." I laughed. Once. Short. Humorless. "It's exactly what I think." She rushed to explain then. Words spilling over each other. Emotional distance. Feeling neglected. Feeling second place. Feeling like she was always sharing me. With my job, my routine, my mother. And then she said the sentence that turned the knife. "He understands that I need to come first." I felt something crack. Not loudly, not visibly, but deep enough that I knew it wouldn't heal the same. "So this is about my mother," I said. She didn't deny it. "She's always there," Sarah said. "Always part of your decisions." I needed someone who chose me without question. I asked the one question that still mattered. "How long?" She whispered. A few months. A few months. While we ate dinner together. While we slept in the same bed. While she smiled at my mother across the table. And suddenly, the ultimatum made sense. It wasn't about boundaries. It was about a racing competition. She needed my mother gone because loyalty to family threatened the illusion she was building with someone else. She needed me isolated. Easier to control. Easier to reshape. I felt sick. Not just betrayed, but used. I need you to understand something here. This wasn't just betrayal. This was my whole life crumbling. Have you ever been blindsided like this? Someone you trusted completely just destroying everything? Share your story below if you've been there. Let's heal together. I asked her if she loved him. She didn't answer right away. Another hesitation. I don't know, she said. But I know I don't want to keep living like this. I nodded slowly. Not because I agreed, but because clarity had finally arrived. And the ultimatum? I asked. Me or my mother? She looked up at me then. Eyes glassy, but not remorseful. I needed to know where I stood, she said. No. She needed to know how far she could push me. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat in the living room, lights off, replaying every moment of the past year. Every joke that landed wrong. Every sigh. Every cold look. It all rearranged itself into a pattern I could no longer ignore. By morning, I knew 3 things for certain. My marriage was already broken. The ultimatum wasn't a question, it was a demand. And if I gave in, I'd lose more than my mother. I'd lose myself. And that realization, that cold, devastating clarity, was the lowest point of my life. Because once you see the truth clearly, you can't unsee it. And the choice ahead of me was going to change everything. There's a moment after betrayal that nobody really talks about. It's not the screaming. It's not the crying. It's the quiet that comes after, when your emotions finally run out of words. That's where I was. The morning after the truth came out, the house felt different. Same walls. Same furniture. But it no longer felt like mine. It felt like a place I was passing through. Like a hotel room I checked into by mistake and needed to leave before morning turned into regret. Sarah tried to talk. Of course she did. She hovered in doorways. Asked if I wanted coffee. Asked if I was okay. That last one almost made me laugh. Because when someone asks, "Are you okay?" after they've just detonated your life, they're not really asking about you. They're checking the damage. I told her I needed space. I didn't yell. I didn't accuse. I just said it calmly, like a man reading instructions off a page. I need to think, I said. She nodded too quickly. Take all the time you need. What she meant was, please don't leave. I want to work that day, but I didn't really work. I sat in my car during lunch and stared at the steering wheel, asking myself the only question that mattered now. Who do I want to be after this? Not who was right. Not who was wrong. Not how much pain I could inflict back. Who do I want to be when this chapter closes? I thought about my mother, about the way she raised me, about the things she taught me without ever lecturing. Loyalty, accountability, self-respect, the quiet kind, not the loud, chest-beating version. I thought about Sarah's ultimatum, and I realized something important. The affair hurt, but the ultimatum was unforgivable, because the affair was a choice she made in weakness. The ultimatum was a choice she made in calculation. She wasn't asking me to heal the marriage. She was asking me to amputate a part of my life to prove devotion. And once someone learns they can make you cut off pieces of yourself, they don't stop. That evening, I didn't go home. I drove straight to my mother's house. She answered the door with a smile that faded the second she saw my face. Mothers know. They don't need explanations. She didn't ask questions. She didn't pry. She just stepped aside and said, "Come in, baby." I sat at her kitchen table, the same one I'd sat at my whole life, and for the first time, I told her everything. Not in a dramatic dump. Just facts. Calm. Measured. Honest. She listened. Hands folded. Eyes steady. When I finished, she reached across the table and took my hand. "Mickle," she said softly, "I never wanted to be a problem in your marriage." I squeezed her hand. "You weren't. You're not." She nodded once, then said something that sealed everything for me. A woman who loves you won't ask you to abandon your mother. She'll ask how to love you better. That was it. That was the line that cut through every doubt I had left. I stayed there that night. Slept in my old room. Same creaky bed. Same street light shining through the blinds. And for the first time in months, I slept deeply. The next morning, my phone was full of messages. Sarah asking where I was. Sarah apologizing. Sarah explaining. Sarah panicking. I didn't respond right away. Instead, I made a list. Not a dramatic one. Not a revenge list. A practical one. What do I need to do? What do I need to protect? What do I need to let go of? I called a lawyer. Quietly. Professionally. I didn't tell Sarah. I didn't threaten. I just gathered information. Knowledge brings calm. And calm brings control. Then I went back to the house. Sarah was waiting for me. Eyes red. Voice shaky. She told me she'd end things with David. She told me she'd do counseling. She told me she'd work on her feelings about my mother. And then she said it again. I just need to know you're choosing me. I looked at her. Really looked. And I realized she still didn't understand what she'd done. She thought this was a negotiation. I told her I needed one night to decide. She nodded, relieved. Thought she'd bought herself time. That night, while she slept, I packed a bag. Not out of anger. Out of resolve. Because some choices don't require discussion once you finally see them clearly. Here's where I made my choice. Now I want to know, do you believe in revenge? Or do you believe in walking away? What's the right move when someone destroys your trust? Comment below. I want to hear both sides. I didn't announce my decision. I didn't sit her down. I didn't give a speech. I waited until morning. Sarah woke up and saw the empty space in the closet first. Not all of it, just enough to notice. Half the hangers gone. The suitcase missing. The drawer where I kept my watch and wallet empty. She walked into the kitchen in her robe, hair still messy. Eyes searching the counters, like the answer might be sitting there. Mickle, she called. I stepped out of the spare room where I'd slept fully dressed. I'm here, I said. Her face shifted when she saw the bag by my feet. You're leaving? She asked, like the idea had only just become real. Yes, I said. Just that. No explanation layered on top. No emotion attached. She rushed toward me. Wait, we said you'd think about it. I did, I said. She grabbed my arm. Not hard. Desperate. You can't just walk away. I gently removed her hand. I can. And I am. Her voice cracked. So that's it. You're choosing her. I met her eyes. Calm. Clear. I'm choosing myself, I said. And the values I won't betray to stay married. She stared at me like I'd spoken a language she didn't understand. You're really going to throw this away? She said. Over your mother? No, I replied. I'm leaving because you asked me to. That landed. She started crying then. Loud. Shaky. The kind of crying that's half regret, half fear of consequences. She apologized again. Promised again. Swore again. I didn't interrupt. I didn't argue. Because when someone only sees your worth after they lose control over you, it's already over. I walked out that door with my bag in one hand and my keys in the other. I didn't look back. I didn't slam anything. I just left. The divorce moved quickly. Not because it was easy, but because there was nothing left to save. Evidence of the affair. Texts. Timelines. Truth has a way of making decisions simple, even when they hurt. Sarah tried calling at first. Then texting. Then emailing. I didn't block her. I just didn't respond. Silence isn't cruelty. It's clarity. Weeks passed. Then months. I rebuilt quietly. New apartment. New routines. Mornings without tension. Evenings without walking on eggshells. I reconnected with friends I'd slowly drifted from. I spent time with my mother without guilt hanging in the air like fog. And slowly, I started to feel whole again. Then, 6 months later, on a Tuesday evening that felt like any other, there was a knock on my door. Not a polite knock. A hesitant one. I opened it, and there she was. Sarah. She looked thinner. Pale. Eyes sunken. One hand resting on her stomach. She was pregnant. And she was crying before she even spoke. Mickle, she said, voice shaking. I didn't know where else to go. My chest tightened, not with longing, but with disbelief. She told me David was gone, that he wasn't ready, that he'd backed out the moment things got real, that she was scared, alone, ashamed. She told me she'd made the biggest mistake of her life. She begged me to let her in. And in that moment, standing there, door open, past staring me in the face, I felt the final test settle into my hands. This wasn't about anger anymore. This was about truth. And this is the moment everything changed. Tell me, are you rooting for me right now? Or do you think I went too far? Be honest in the comments. Uncle Mickle can take it. I looked at her, at the woman who tried to erase my mother, who'd betrayed my trust, who now stood at my door asking for rescue. And I finally understood something I hadn't before. Love doesn't beg when it's sincere. It stands on accountability. I told her I couldn't help her. Not cruelly, not loudly, just honestly. And when I closed that door, I didn't feel victory. I felt peace. Because the choice I made 6 months earlier had saved me from making a worse one now. After I closed that door, I stood there longer than I expected. Not because I was tempted, but because endings, even the right ones, carry weight. I leaned my forehead against the wood and let myself breathe. One deep breath, then another. My hands were steady. My heart wasn't racing. That's how I knew I'd done the right thing. When a decision comes from anger, your body tells on you. When it comes from clarity, your body settles. I went back into my apartment and sat on the edge of the couch, staring at nothing for a while. No music, no TV, just quiet. The good kind. The kind that doesn't ask you to perform or explain yourself. Sarah texted later that night. Just one message. I understand. I'm sorry. I didn't reply. Not because I wanted to punish her, but because some conversations are already finished. The next few months were about rebuilding in ways that didn't look impressive from the outside. No dramatic glow-up. No revenge success story. Just small, steady steps toward a life that felt honest again. I focused on my health. Took walks in the morning. Cooked real meals. Slept better than I had in years. I started volunteering one Saturday a month. Nothing big. Just a way to remind myself that my story wasn't the center of the universe. I spent time with my mother. Real time. Not rushed. Not defensive. Just present. We talked about ordinary things. She never brought up Sarah unless I did. Never said, "I told you so." That restraint alone told me everything I needed to know about her character. One afternoon, months later, she looked at me and said, "You seem lighter." I nodded. I am. And I meant it. People assume healing is about forgetting. It's not. It's about remembering without bleeding. I still thought about the marriage sometimes. The good moments. The promises. The version of the future I'd pictured and had to let go of. But those thoughts no longer came with panic, or anger, or regret. They came with acceptance. I ran into Sarah once at a grocery store. Pure coincidence. She looked tired, older somehow. We nodded at each other. Nothing more. No bitterness. No longing. Just two people who once shared a life, and now shared a memory. I heard later, through a friend, that she had the baby. A boy. I wished the child well in my heart. Truly. Children don't deserve to inherit the weight of adult choices. And then I let that information go. My life didn't turn into some fairy tale after that. I didn't suddenly meet the perfect partner or win the emotional lottery. What I gained was quieter, but more valuable. I gained self-trust. I learned that love without respect is just attachment wearing a mask. That ultimatums aren't boundaries, they're threats. And that the people who truly love you won't ask you to betray the values that made you worth loving in the first place. There were nights I felt lonely. Of course there were. Healing doesn't mean constant happiness. It means peace with the hard moments. It means not bargaining with your soul just to avoid being alone. And slowly, that peace became my foundation. Looking back now, I wonder if I'd do it all the same way again. What about you? If you could go back and handle your worst betrayal differently, would you? Or was the pain necessary to become who you are now? Let me know below. Sometimes people ask me if I hate Sarah. I don't. Hate would mean she still had power over me. What I feel instead is distance. The healthy kind. The kind that protects what's been rebuilt. Because walking away didn't make me weak. It made me honest. And honesty, real honesty, has a way of shaping a future that doesn't require you to keep explaining your past. These days, when I look back on that chapter of my life, I don't see it as a failure anymore. I see it as a test. Not a test of love, but a test of identity. Of how much of myself I was willing to give up just to keep someone else comfortable. And I passed that test, not because I was strong in the moment, but because I finally stopped lying to myself. Here's what I learned, folks, and I want you to hear this clearly. Love should never ask you to shrink. Commitment should never demand you abandon your roots. And anyone who truly cares about you won't force you into a choice where the only way to win is to lose yourself. When Sarah gave me that ultimatum, me or your mother, she thought she was testing my loyalty. What she was really revealing was her fear. Fear of not being enough. Fear of sharing space with anything that reminded her she wasn't the center of my universe. But real partnership isn't about being the center. It's about standing beside someone who already knows who they are. Walking away didn't make me heartless. It didn't make me cold. It made me aligned with my values, my upbringing, and the kind of man I want to be for the rest of my life. And if you're listening to this right now, sitting somewhere quiet, replaying your own story in your head, I want you to know something. You're not wrong for wanting respect. You're not weak for setting a boundary. And you're not obligated to stay where love comes with conditions that cost you your dignity. So here's my final question for you, and I really want to hear your thoughts. Is it better to forgive and move on, or to make sure they understand exactly what they lost? There's no wrong answer. Drop it in the comments. So that's my story, folks. If it resonated with you, go ahead and hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments where you're listening from. I want to know how far Uncle Mickle's voice travels. Here's the final truth I'll leave you with. When someone asks you to choose between love and self-respect, choosing yourself is the only choice that lets you sleep at night. Uncle Mickle.